Hello, and welcome to Healing with Alita. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And please enjoy today's message. Does God still answer prayer like He did in biblical times? Can He still manifest and do the impossible? Is He able to do things that are extraordinary in nature? And more importantly, or equally as important, if He does, and in fact He does, are we open to recognize these miracles that He can give in our lives? And these are questions that I often hear. So on today, I wanted to touch base on, let's take, for example, the woman with the issue of blood. In Matthew 9, verse 20 through 22, we hear about the woman that has the issue of blood, and she wants to be healed. And Jesus is walking, and she struggles with all her might to get through the crowd just to touch the hem of His garment, because she knows if she touches the hem of His garment, she'll be healed. And many times in our lives, we're struggling, seemingly wanting to reach God, just like the woman with the issue of blood, wanting so desperately to be healed from emotional issues, physical issues, mental issues, and perhaps sometimes maybe even struggling financially and in relationships. And we want to have the presence of God manifested in these situations to help them to resolve. So on today, I wanted to share with you some of the times when God has showed up in my life and done the impossible. And the first situation that came to mind was my youngest daughter. I was 7 months pregnant with her, and on this particular day I started to cough and cough and cough, and the more I coughed, I noticed that water was running down my leg. I called, my husband came, and we got to the hospital, and once we got to the hospital, I was told that I was in labor. The sonogram showed that almost all of my amniotic fluid was gone out of my uterus, and that a Fern test was done to look at the fluid and verify that it was in fact amniotic fluid. And then I was told that I was actually in labor, and that this child would be delivered before morning. And the child would not survive because the lungs were not strong enough, she'd not been in the gestational process long enough, and the child would not survive. My husband and I then began to cry profusely. We didn't want to lose this child. And all of a sudden, I remember hearing a voice, and the voice said, "The child will live and not die." And I stopped crying, and I said to him, "Did you hear that?" And he said, "Did I hear what? The television?" I said, "No, I heard his voice. He said that this child is going to live and not die." Now, the doctor is now at the foot of my bed, and she sort of looks at him and just sort of nods her head like, "That's just not going to happen." And then she begins to explain that we are now going to put, I'm going to be put in an ambulance, and the ambulance is going to take me to another hospital that is more suited to handle this delivery. I'm taken by ambulance to this other hospital, and I stay there overnight, and I'm really happy, and I keep telling my husband, "Can you just please go to White Castle and get me a cheeseburger?" And the nurses are looking like she can't eat, she's in labor, and I keep explaining to him that I've heard the voice God telling me that this child is going to live and not die. The nurses and the doctors are sort of giving looks to me like, this is maybe what she wants to happen, but this isn't what's going to happen. Around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, I send my husband home with my older daughter, and the next morning my doctor arrives, and he begins to examine me. He begins to have all these discussions and call other doctors into the room, and they're all around my bed talking. And finally I look at him and I said, "Why is everyone here, and what are you talking about?" And he says, "That's what I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to figure out why you are in a bed for a very sick woman who was purportedly in labor, and you're shut tight. This chart says that you were dilated 5-6 centimeters. You are completely shut tight, and you are missing no amniotic fluid. I'm sending you home, and I'll try to figure out what happened tomorrow or during the course." That daughter is a thriving teenager today. Another situation that comes to mind is I was looking for another place to worship. The place that I was worshiping was no longer a viable place for me to worship. Unbeknownst, my brother-in-law called me, and I had been praying about this situation. And unbeknownst to my brother-in-law, he called me and he said, the Lord says that tomorrow at noon you will receive your answer in prayer. So at that time, at noon, I was leaving work and laying on my face in a beautiful prayer room near my job. And I set my alarm on my phone for 12 o'clock so that I would remember. And as I was praying, I heard music coming out of the sanctuary. And I stood up, and as I stood up to walk out of the door, my alarm went off, signifying that it was 12 noon. And I opened the door and literally walked into a Messianic rabbi and began to find out that they were about to begin worship services nearby. And these worship services were like none that I had ever attended before, having grown up a pastor's daughter, having been in church all my life. These services were very different. We were not, God was not on our schedule, we were on His schedule. And I remember this particular Saturday at worship, all during the course of the week before the service was to take place, I felt a wind of God all week, as if He was blowing into me and blowing into me. And I was so excited. I said, well, God, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to worship? Do you want me to worship? Do you want me to fast? And when we arrived on that Saturday, interestingly enough, the rabbi said the same thing, that he was so excited during the whole week. He kept saying, Lord, are you coming? And should I pray? Should I worship? What should I do? Should I fast? And he responded that God said, I'm already here. Well, on that Saturday, I was very excited to arrive. And I arrived and I was sitting on the sofa. And shortly thereafter, others were up praying and there was a lot going on. And I said, Lord, all week, you blow into me and I'm so excited. And I'm sitting here doing nothing. And at that very moment, the rabbi says, Alida, the Lord says you have something for this woman. And I was so busy in my little pity party that I didn't even see the woman who was sitting in a wheelchair. And she looked rather green and sort of ashen, her skin tone. And I didn't know what to do. So he gave me the oil, and I heard the Lord say, anoint her eyes to see me, anoint her ears to hear me, anoint her mouth to speak my word. And I did that. I sat on the floor and I touched those areas with the oil. And then all of a sudden I could not breathe, but I could breathe. So I was taking in these very deep breaths and trying to breathe and not really understanding what was going on. And that continued for a little bit of a while. And then I began to feel just power and His presence and more and more and more. And I looked up, and when I looked up, I saw a ball that appeared like a ball of fire. And it was coming down from the heavens, but it was coming down incrementally, so quickly. And I became afraid for an instant because I said, if this hits me, this is going to hurt. Because I could feel that power of it. And the next thing I know, that it entered and I roared like a lion, and then I was exhausted and just sat on the floor. I remember going home and being a little embarrassed, and I said, Lord, why do you have me do these things? Why was I roaring like a lion? I'm embarrassed. And I prayed about it, and I prayed about it. And I said, I'll do whatever you want me to do. Just let me know what's going on. And it was maybe, I want to say 3 months later, we received an email. And in an email, the rabbi referenced the woman coming. And the email speaks to her only having 10% of her lungs. And it speaks to her lungs having grown back. And she noticed this in increments, as she wasn't able to get to her dresser without being tired. And she was able to do that, and then to get to the bathroom, and then to get to the stairs, etc. And when she went back to the doctor, that's when she was told that her lungs had grown back and they were fully functioning. Another time that I want to reference, and this will more than likely be my last, is a young lady that I know even to this day. And we were in a professional environment at this time. And she had said to me, does God love me? And I said, of course He loves you. And she said, then why won't He let me have a baby? And we, again, are in an open area, in a very professional area. And the Spirit of the Lord said, lay hands. And I'm thinking, you want me to do that now when I'm in the middle of this professional environment? And He didn't respond, which means you need to do what I've asked you to do. So I placed my hand on her belly, and I heard his voice, and he said, within 3 months' time. And within 3 months' time, she was pregnant, and I believe it was maybe 7 years or more around that time frame that they'd been trying, to no avail. And today they have 2 beautiful young boys, amazing young boys. So as we began earlier, and there are so many more that I can talk about, but I'm going to stop there and just say to you that trust him even when it seems impossible that it can't happen. It can, and he will answer prayer. And just remember that when you begin to doubt, dig in deep, find verses in the Bible that can help you to renew your faith, to know that God is always able to do the impossible and to answer your prayers far and beyond anything that we could ever expect. May the peace that surpasses all understanding guard your hearts and mind. Until next time, shalom.